So, Mr. President, dear colleagues, So I would speak to a special, topic of the European politics, which is in transition in our period, the late 15th century, about the Hungarian-French or perhaps Franco-Hungarian contacts after the death of Charles the Bald, Duke of Burgundy. So, in the late Middle Ages, as in earlier centuries, the relationship between the French and Hungarian monarchies, influenced by geographical distance, could be considered occasional, but nevertheless systematic. By this I mean that whenever the two countries shared a common platform of interest, relations were renewed and strengthened, and then regressed again when this community of interests was disappeared. The Duke of Burgundy became significant in the 1470s for Matthias Corvinus. From 1471, after the death of his opponent George of Poděbrady, King of Bohemia, the Hungarian king wanted to confirm his title as King of Bohemia. At the same time, Charles the Bald, Duke of Burgundy, wanted the German Roman Emperor to elevate the Duke of Burgundy to a kingdom in its own right. The two wishes created a common interest. Matthias wanted the support of Charles, whom the Pope had also designated as mediator in the Czech problem, while the Duke of Burgundy could rely on the support of Matthias, who would become King of Bohemia and thus Prince-Elector of the Empire. Neither of the efforts succeeded, but mutual cooperation between the two parties was important in the Western diplomacy of the 1470s. However, the sudden death of Duke Charles the Bald in 1777 profoundly altered the situation in Western Europe. Matthias thus aimed to fill the political vacuum by drawing closer to the French monarchy. While most scholars date this political shift to 1481, we attempt to demonstrate here that the kings of Hungary and France sought contact immediately after the death of the Duke of Burgundy, possibly as early as 77, but certainly by 78. King Louis of France, who was at war with the Habsburg over the Burgundian heritage, was an ideal partner for Matthias. However, certain obstacles hindered their rapprochement. The first document alluding the existence of a Franco-Hungarian relation at the time is a letter from Louis of France dated March 14, 78. It was addressed to his chancellor, Pierre Doriol, and the letter contains the following lines. I will quote in French, but there's an English traduction. Monsieur le chancelier, je vous prie que vous m'envoyez le double des instructions et lettres que vous avez touchant le roi de Hongrie et que ce soit par un de vos gens, homme sûr. The letter was written during the war over the Burgundian heritage. After the death of Duke Charles the Bald, the King of France sought to acquire the territories of Burgundy and Flanders, which meant confronting the Habsburgs, notably Maximilian, the son of Emperor Frederick III. unable to secure a decisive military victory, Louis of France sought a diplomatic solution during the various truces in the conflict. The aforementioned document was written in this context. As the text implies, before the spring of 78, but most likely in the previous year, a correspondent of which we have no further information existed, so a correspondent existed between the French and Hungarian monarchs. Matthew's interest in these relations must have arisen after June 12 in 77, when he declared war or Frederick the Emperor. Thus, Hungary could have participated in the anti-Habsburg coalition forged by the French, which already included the Swiss Confederation, the Republic of Venice, and the Duchy of Milan. The day after, when Matthias declared war on the Emperor, so on June 30, the king informed most of the princes involved in the conflict by writing to the Saxon princes, Ernest and Albrecht, Sigismund of Tyrol, and once again to the Swiss. Given the logic of Hungarian diplomatic actions, it is likely that such a letter was also addressed to Louis of France, but we have no evidence. This raises the question of whether the letter from the King of France mentioned earlier refers to these correspondences. Later Franco-Hungarian negotiation in 78, 79 provide a clearer picture of the diplomatic maneuvers of the two monarchs. In a report dated May 14, 78, the ambassador of the Marquis of Montferrat in Austria wrote from Graz that the Hungarian king had broken alliance with Louis of France. This document not only highlights the existence of an earlier coalition between the two kings, but also demonstrates the precarious nature of this relation. The ambassador's information is corroborated by a later letter from Matthias to the emperor dated January 12 in 1479, in which he expressed his intention to support Maximilian's military campaign in Flanders. We could regard the denunciation of the French alliance as one of the Matthias' typical diplomatic reversals. His military operation in Austria culminated in the Peace of Gmunden-Kornenburg in December 77. The agreement with Emperor Frederick also addressed the Italian question. The king, the Hungarian king, asked the emperor to replace the young Duke of Milan, Giangalazzo Sforza, with Federigo of Aragon, his brother-in-law, thus favoring his wife's family, Beatrice of Aragon. Although this peace clause was never executed, it allowed the Hungarian monarch to consider renouncing the French alliance, which he found unnecessary in order to draw closer to the emperor. The final remarks of the Montferrat ambassador's report are quite interesting. I will quote in Italian. Decisi purché Sua Maestà, del re d'Ungheria, è in liga col Serenissimo Re di Napoli. La re d'Ungheria dicitur rompera contra Veneziani. Indeed, the King of Hungary had been in conflict with certain Italian states. It was precisely at this time that he severed all relations with Milan due to the Gmunden Treaty mentioned earlier. Regarding Venice, the issue of Dalmatian territories caused such tension between the Republic and Hungary that in 78 Matthias was already considering launching a military campaign in northern Italy. In accordance with the Peace of Gmunden, Matthias could hope, justifiably or not, it is difficult to say, that the emperor would fulfill his demands regarding Milan, and seeing the rising tension between Hungary and the Venetian Republic, the Hungarian king might have considered that his alliance with France was hindering the realization of his plans in northern Italy. Tensions between Matthias and various Italian states reached a peak when a Florentine affair known as the Pazzi conspiracy disrupted the status quo of the peninsula. The crisis, which divided Italy for years, began on April 26, 78, when certain members of the Pazzi family, with papal approval, attempted to assassinate the leader of the Medici family during Easter Mass. The Pope's nephew, as well as the Archbishop of Pisa, and several local clergy members were involved in the conspiracy. The attempt, fabulously, was only partially successful. Lorenzo de' Medici survived, but his brother Giuliano was assassinated by one of the conspirators, Bandino Bandini. The conspirators were all punished, but due to the execution of several ecclesiastical persons, Pope Sixtus I excommunicated Florence and called for the expulsion of the Medici family from the city. The attempt led to a military conflict that divided Italy in two factions. Florence, supported by Venice and Milan, succeeded in securing the support of Louis of France. The opposing faction, composed by the Pope and the Kingdom of Naples, which provided the military forces and whose ruler was Ferrante, the father-in-law of Matthias, was the main rival. The late 15th century, both King Matthias Corvinus of Hungary and King Louis of France engaged in diplomatic efforts to mediate the Italian conflicts, each driven by their own political interests and alliances. In the autumn of 78, Matthias Corvinus dispatched his envoy, Francesco Fontana, to persuade major Italian powers, Venice, Florence, the Papal States, and King of Ferrante of Naples, to pursue peace. He emphasized the necessity of a united Christian coalition against the Ottoman Turks, expressing his readiness to lead a military campaign against the Ottomans once peace in Italy was secured. Concurrently, his ambassador to Milan, Giustiano Cavitello, delivered a similar message urging Milan to reconcile with other Italian states to facilitate a collective military action against the Ottomans. King Louis of France, a supporter of the Italian League opposing Naples and the papacy, employed comparable arguments. In November 78, he instructed his ambassador in Rome to advocate for peace among the Italian states, highlighting the ongoing Ottoman threats of the Christendom. Louis proposed a general council in Lyon to address these issues, underscoring the importance of unity against the Ottoman expansion. Despite their diplomatic appeals for peace and Christian unity, both monarchs subtly hinted potential military involvement in their cause. Fontana, the Hungarian envoy, conveyed to the Duke of Ferrara that any attack against King Ferrante of Naples would be considered as an offense against King Matthias himself. Similarly, Louis of France warned Naples and the papacy to cease hostilities against Florence, threatening military action to enforce peace if it is necessary. While both kings invoked the idea of a united Christian front against the Ottomans, their underlying motives were influenced by immediate political interests. Ultimately, the looming Ottoman threat, exemplified by the capture of Otranto in Italy in 1480, compelled the Italian states to prioritize unity. The external danger facilitated reconciliations, such as the peace between Florence and Rome, leading to a more cohesive Christian response to the Ottoman advance. Just a remark here, Hungarian troops were involved to liberate the city of Otranto some months later. So in summary, between 77 and 81, the diplomatic efforts of France and Hungary exhibited numerous convergences, such as the mutual opposition of the monarchs to the Habsburgs and their intertwined involvement in Italian affairs. These shared interests fostered the establishment of the aforementioned contacts. However, the engagement of Matthias, Corvinus, and Louis of France in Italy's internal conflicts placed them on opposing sides, thereby straining their relation, though not severing them entirely. A few years later, in 1486-87, these relations were revitalized. Matthias' persistent efforts to obtain Prince Cem, the half-brother of Sultan Bayezid II, and a claimant of the throne of Istanbul, captivated in France, once again created an optimum moment for the rapprochement of the two kingdoms. But it is another story. So I am very glad for your kind attention.
Thank you very much indeed. I just would like to correct myself and saying that this session is also include several languages. I mean, French, Italian, and like. So now, as I mentioned at the very beginning, we a little bit changed the sequence, and now we turn to a little bit to the south of Central Europe, and I would like to ask Dr. Suzana Simon from the Croatian Academy of Sciences and Arts to deliver a speech.
Okay, hello. 1 second. Okay. So, thank you. Jó napot kívánok. Nagyon boldog vagyok, hogy ma itt lehetek. This is as far as I can actually go with Hungarian, although sometimes that's not actually a bad thing. So, as you can see today, we are going a little bit to the south and a little bit to the east and a little bit to Adriatic, because we are doing something that combines at least 3 of our countries. So I am Croatian. As you can see, I come from the Croatian Academy of Sciences and Arts, but I cooperate with my husband, who comes from Romania, from Transylvania, and who comes from Romanian side. And of course, the middle ground, as always, is Hungary. So what is a person, who is actually a person that combines all of these actually things, is the illegitimate son of Matthias Corvinus. Actually, the majority of my research work until now has focused on the period of Sigismund of Luxembourg, but with this I actually somehow decided to expand the period in general, because this proved to be a very fruitful topic for the research. So, as you can see in actually my brief summary, but all of you know the story about John Corvinus. So, according to the wishes of his father, King Matthias, John Corvinus should have become the king of Hungary. This was actually the ideal dynastical case, or at least worst case scenario, he could have been the king of Bosnia, or potentially maybe Croatia, if that was in agreement with the House of Habsburg. Of course, we know that now nothing became of it, and that is well known in the historiography. The co-king of Bohemia, Ladislaus II Jagiellon, was elected king of Hungary, and John had to concede defeat and gradually somehow makes sort of a living at the borders with the Ottoman Empire. So by mid-1497, John Corvinus thus reached an agreement with Maximilian I of Habsburg, the king of the Romans and co-king of Hungary, and at the same time with the Republic of Venice, becoming the citizen and the nobleman. And this is somehow can be perceived that it is a strange alliance because of the situation with his father, late Matthias. John, however, did not renounce his allegiance towards Ladislaus as the rightful king of Hungary. And as a result, for the final 7 years of his life, from the period of 1497 until 1504, John Corvinus seemingly had, we can say, actually 3 masters. One is, of course, Ladislaus, second is Maximilian, and the third one being Venice. So this presentation today aims to explore the impact of these political ties on the royal territories under the administration of John Corvinus and his other family, because by marriage he actually entered into a Croatian milieu with the Frankopans. So today I will particularly focus on 3 details which will pass from somehow micro to micro questions. First is actually the general overview to depict the complexity, then the beginnings with the narrative on the family's origin, and then finally the Venetian aspect. So we can actually say that from father to son, the story about Ivanish, John Corvinus, he's called Ivanish in Croatian tradition. Of course, he's called János in Hungarian. He's called Joan in Romanian tradition. But we will get back to the question how he actually signed his documents. But the story, of course, starts with his father, and of course, with Antonio Bonfini. With John Corvinus, we are on a very slippery grounds because the only monograph ever devoted to him was authored by Gyula Schönherr in the 1890s. Afterwards, there were several attempts because, for instance, Ferdo Šišić started on collection of sources on John Corvinus, but this also in general was cut short. And then in the recent years, the topic was addressed by Peter Kozak and Tibor Neumann. They made significant contributions in the field, but this still in general does not compensate the lack of synthesis on the topic. The topic that furthermore has also some other serious shortcomings. So, what I will present today is now based strictly on the entries of Croatian Encyclopedia and biographical lexicon of the Lexicographical Institute Miroslav Krleža in Zagreb, so that you can actually grasp how much monograph is needed on the subject. So it goes that Ivanish Corvin, he was the Duke of Slavonia, Ban of Dalmatia in Croatia, of course, born in Wroclaw on the 2nd of April 1473 and died in Krapina on the 12th of October 1504. He was designated as a legitimate son of King Matthias Corvinus, paternal grandson of János Hunyadi. Since Matthias had no children in his marriage, he wanted Ivanish to succeed him on the throne, so he gave him estates in Croatia and Slavonia. However, after Matthias's death in 1490, the Hungarian and Croatian nobles, hoping for greater privileges, elected Ladislaus II Jagellon as the Croatian-Hungarian king. Before that, they promised Ivanish that by ceding to the royal throne, he would become the king of Bosnia, the hereditary Duke of Slavonia, the Ban of Croatia-Dalmatia, and that he would keep his possessions in general. Ivanish was confirmed by the king with the title of Duke of Slavonia, held office only for 4 years from 1490 until 1494, and he also held right to all of his estates. Although he received confirmation of the hereditary kingdom in Bosnia, he never actually assumed this office. In 1495, he was appointed Ban of Croatia, Ban of Slavonia, and of Dalmatia, and held the honor of Ban in the subsequent period as well. He helped King Ladislaus in the battles against Maximilian I, the pretender to the Croatian Hungarian throne. In 1491, the king's army, under the command of Ivanish, defeated Maximilians not far from Zagreb and forced the German garrison at Kaptol, meaning the bishop's borough, to surrender. Ivanish again fought with the Ottomans in Croatia, Dalmatia, and Bosnia. He defeated in 1501 under Jajce, but was defeated near Knin, and he took refuge in Krapina, where he soon died. He was buried in the church of the Pauline monastery in Lepoglava. As you can see, this is actually very boring, and it seems detailed, but it's not actually detailed information on the topic. So additional information we can get from some other entries, and they sort of fill the gap, and they further somehow give detailed listings of the estates that they owned, because it seems that they were more focused on the actual possessions that he had in his hands. So it says that thus Ivanish Corvin, in the period of 1479 till 85, acquired estates in Transylvania, Sikloš in Baranja, Morović in Vukovo County, and the estates of Elizabeth Silagi, his paternal grandmother. And then furthermore, during 1489, many captains of royal cities and fortresses swore that they would surrender their cities to him, meaning Ivanish, after the king's death, and so on and back forth. After Vienna, the father handed him over the royal court, the castle of Visegrad on the Danube, with the crown of St. Stephen, Komarno and Pozsony with counties, the estates, which is very important, actually, of the counts of Zagorje in Slavonia, Senj and other towns in medieval Croatia, and several other places that were in the conquered part of the Austrian provinces. The king also intended to leave his possessions in Moravia, Silesia, and Lusatia to his son. This also is very dry information, and more emphasis is again placed on the landed politics, because he kept most of his possessions, especially actually in the Croatian lands, and lost most of them in the Austrian parts, including Silesia and Lusatia as well. In addition, of course, one has to bear in mind that all of the castles, royal cities and castles, had to be given to Ladislaus. Of course, at the time, problems of the southern border were the Ottomans, and nobility at that time had to handle multiple loyalties. When I say multiple loyalties, of course, in this respect, I mean multiple loyalties to Christian rulers, because in these parts of the world we don't have any sort of other multiple loyalties, because they had to handle imminent threat. So to continue, in general, he had the duty to wage the war against the Turks. In 1499, he won several victories over them in the area of Knin, and next year the war was very close to the border in Slavonia, but his exemplary behavior was at the end of 1501, when he broke into Bosnia and defeated the Turks near Jajce, thus breaking the siege over the city. It was his greatest victory and the first successful defense of Jajce after the creation of the Corvinian defense system on the southern borders of the kingdom. In 1502, he stayed some time in Venice and went to the pilgrimage to Loreto. The truce agreed with the Turks in 1503 did not actually weaken his position, or their position in general, because they kept all of their strongholds. For example, Kamengrad, from where they could actually easily attack the Croatian lands. And when King Vladislav fell ill in 1404, many in the kingdom began to think about a possible change of the throne. And in this respect, here comes his father-in-law, meaning Count Bernardin Frankopan of Ozalj, who decided once again to highlight that his son-in-law and the royal son could be suited as a candidate. Of course, all plans were soon interrupted, and he almost ended in the Turkish captivity in Krin in 1504, and after that he fell ill and died. So the complexity of the topic is also that the majority of authors did not connect the fact that because of his marriage with Beatrice of Frankopan, Ivaniš also got hold of the Bihać and Novi, which were part of the hereditary estates of the Frankopans in Croatia. Furthermore, his prominent father-in-law was the famous Bernardin Frankopan. He was a survivor, actually one of the few survivors, of the Battle of Krbava in 1493, which later on shaped collective Croatian identity, and he was the orator in Reichstage in Nuremberg, where he did his very famous Oratio pro Croatia in 1522. And just a brief exclamation note, it was the second edition of the manuscript was recently republished in Croatia. So just a brief digression. It is constantly actually repeated in Croatian historiography that the Frankopan was not actually the intended wife for Ivaniš, but that the intended wife was Bianca Maria Sforza, and that because of the agency of his stepmother, Beatrice of Aragon, this was actually unsuccessful, but there is no ground for such speculations. But to understand properly the story about Corvinus, we actually have to go back to the origins and to his grandfather, John Hunyadi, which luckily today we are actually moderated by a Hunyadi. So John Hunyadi became truly known as the illegitimate son of Sigismund of Luxembourg at the height of the Transylvanian Reformation through Gaspar Hertai's interpretive Hungarian translation of Antonio Bonfini's Rerum Ungaricum Decades in the early 1470s. So until then, Bonfini has been the only one to record that King Sigismund was John's rumored father, and then to dismiss the story as a fabrication of the Cili, meaning Celski, family against the father of Matthias Corvinus. This in general is not that unusual because the Hunyadis and the Cili were actually natural enemies. So, in general, usually perceived as Matthias's learned trustee, Bonfini inserted the slander in the manuscript he presented a bit later in 1492 to Matthias's unwanted successor, Ladislaus Jagiellon. And basically, according to Bonfini himself, in the continuation of his Decades, which roughly can be dated to 1495, he had delivered, prior to his meeting with Ladislaus, a funeral oration for his father, King Casimir IV, in July 1492. So the new king liked the work to the extent that he ennobled not only Antonio and his son Francesco, but also the copyist of the manuscript, which you can actually see here, the charter of the ennoblement. So John Corvinus, he was certainly the illegitimate son of Matthias and Barbara, the daughter of a merchant from Wrocław or Breslau. He was born, as we all know, on the 2nd of April, 1473, and he remained Matthias's only offspring in spite of the monarch's subsequent marriage to Beatrice of Aragon. Notwithstanding his father's efforts, John failed to win the throne in Buda. Nevertheless, starting chiefly with the end of the 1490s, he made a successful career as the Duke of Slavonia in Croatia. So after his unexpected death, all of his children died within 4 years, so his sons basically passed within a year after him. So apparently, John Corvinus II, who signed his name in Czech with Hans, had his own version of the origins of John Hunyadi, his grandfather. So, according to the variant of the Cili Chronicle adapted around 1502 in the entourage of John Corvinus, John Hunyadi has not been the offspring of Sigismund of Luxembourg, but of the latest contemporary Mircea I of Wallachia. So you can actually see how the story shifted a little bit more towards the east. So since the 1450s, it was commonly accepted that the paternal family of John was from Wallachia and that his mother has been a Serbian or a Greek of import, whose figure is nowadays commonly associated to a fresco in the castle of Hunyadi in Transylvania. So Heltei was the first one to claim that John's mother has been a Wallachian from the Hatzeg land in Transylvania, which is an area nearby Hunyadi. And so we come to actually something quite different. In May 1497, following a year of negotiations, so John Corvinus, the husband of Beatrice, Frankopan, recently reconciled with the king of the Romans, Maximilian I of Habsburg, and Stephen III of Moldavia, was actually admitted to the ranks of the elite of the Republic of St. Mark. So after a series of failures, and most recently on being the defeat of his ally, Lawrence Wilaki or Ilochki, Duke of Bosnia, by Ladislaus II, King of Bohemia, Hungary and Croatia, the Venetian ennoblement in general was of paramount importance for John, so allowing him to rise between the Adriatic and the Danube, and while doing that actually to ensure Croatia's place among the powers. It is very interesting to note down that in the Venetian registers, they go together registered as Hungaria, Polonia, Dacia, and Croatia, and that for Venice is somehow defined Christendom's border with the Ottoman Empire. So you can see on the slide the diploma issued in the name of the Doge Agostino Barbarigo marked precisely that new beginning for John. So based on the entries in the diaries of Marino Sanudo the Young, which were unedited at the time, the Venetian ennoblement of John came to the attention of Hungarian historiography in the mid-1800s, after the revolution of 1848-49. I think that in general, because of that, it failed to leave a lasting mark. This also led somehow to the errors, because in the complex and detailed list of all of the citizens of Venetian Republic compiled by Reinhold Müller, John Corvinus was not listed as Duke. He was listed as Duke of Lithuania, which generally is an obvious mistake. So, as you can see, the deed itself is nothing out of the ordinary. It falls into the category of elite privileges which were issued by the Serenissima. Alike in the cases of Stefan Dusan, Đurat Branković, or some other Eastern dignitaries, the Venetian document for John Corvinus was important through the prospects of opening for the new citizen and the ennoblement of the Republic of St. Mark. Further researches should be done into the career of John of Corvinus, which is actually a short career which was overshadowed, certainly in the historiography, by that of his father, but in general are prone to provide somehow additional documentary insights into the history of an area that was actually far larger, that was allotted in general to the young Duke. And so this brief overview, okay, almost 20 more seconds. This brief overview was not actually intended to answer everything, more actually to propose questions and line of thinking, because in the future we are preparing a monograph on John Corvinus, because his career, like I said, is often overlooked and shadowed by his short life, political circumstances and background, and potentially all of the archives one must go to for collecting a variety of documents to answer the complexity of the period. Not only because of the complexity of the period, vast estates in his hands, but also because of his untimely death, and that the death of his sons and daughter. His estates were transferred to Beatrice's second husband, which was Margrave George of Brandenburg, with which the complexity of tracking down the charters and records became even more complicated once again. However, with these smallish finds of documents of significance, regardless whether they are re-evaluated information or newly found documents in foreign archives, we are actually one step closer in entangling the story at its end, when it came down from father to son, actually. And at the end, can we actually speak about multifold loyalties, or just actually the reality of political circumstances at the dusk of the medieval period? So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. And just a very tiny thing, re-emphasizing what Susie actually said, that John Corvin was an illegitimate son, so I failed to raise any claim for the former Hunyadi's estate present day in Romania, otherwise it would be really lovely. Thank you very much. And Susie also mentioned already the Reichstag. Now we are moving towards the southeastern representative, the Reichstage in plural, before the Congress of Vienna 1515. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. I think this is the first time that I speak after my wife, so let's see how this works.
Yeah. There are not only political ties, but also marital ties around here.
So I will try to be as brief as possible. My presentation is an adjusted version of what I initially wanted to present. It's an adjusted version based on last week's conference, Medicine conference in Munich, which Adam and I and Susie attended. So it will be perhaps understandable why I adjusted it. First, I adjusted it because there's a big Austrian project now on Maximilian, which will, let's say, reshape his image in accordance not so much with the sources, but with modern day requirements, which will leave a lasting mark. Second thing is that nowadays the floor belongs to databases that register sources and at times even interpret them in a way that moves them away from the original. But this is a topic, I think, for entirely different conference. Anyhow, this last aspect brought me back to something that is of particular relevance, meaning the fact that the Regesta Imperii series devoted to Maximilian basically came to an end with the death of Hermann Wiesflecker and with the retirement of Manfred Golleger. So we are stuck with the last volume that was ended in 1504, and in total from 1493 to 1504, there were something like 20,000+ calendar documents, but nothing after the said time span. Therefore, I had to address the topic a bit differently without going into speculations as much as possible, and just staying as close as possible to what information can be somehow controlled at present. Therefore, the narrowing down. So in total, we are dealing with over 50 so-called assemblies with different names: Kaiserliche Tage, Reichstage, Fürstentage. Interesting enough, I could not find a designation, Christentag, that was employed for the Reichstage in Regensburg in 1454 and 1471. This is also indicative for the sensibilities of the age, when this, let's say, crusader thought doesn't come to the forefront anymore, although it's very present in the narratives of Jagiellonian envoys, Maximilian's own speeches, but it doesn't come up, at least to my knowledge, in this. I narrowed it down to the case of Walachians, where the first documented embassy at the Reichstag is at the Reichstag of Freiburg im Breisgau, and goes on without many interruptions until 1513 and the Reichstag of Worms. And then it also comes to an apparent end. And I will focus on these events of 1512, 1513, which resemble a maximum. And under these circumstances, an overview of some lesser known sources might therefore be relevant. Now, before I begin with the actual topic, I should emphasize one aspect. According to Venetian ambassadors in Buda, the presence of representatives of the princes voivodes of Wallachia and Moldavia at the Hungarian diets was a matter of usual business, chiefly in the 1520s. So therefore, from the very beginning, one must factor in that this kind of attendance of a Reichstag should be viewed also in connection to the attendance of the Hungarian Diet. So the origins of said story of 1512-1513 lie at the end of 1510. 1510 is the year from Eastern perspective when Moldavia concluded peace with Jagiellonian Poland, ruled by the younger brother of Ladislaus II, Sigismund. This entry is interesting for two reasons. Before, it was registered that the Hungarian king had agreed to support Maximilian against Venice. Venice being the traditional protector of the voivodes of Moldavia ever since the reign of Stephen III, the father of the then ruler of Moldavia, Bogdan III. Secondly, it is the only time, to my knowledge, when a Hungarian and Wallachian ambassador, Botschafter, were associated. This was not usually the case, so that you have ambassadors from two different powers joining hands and going together. The only other example that I know in relation to Wallachia is in relation to Venice, where over the last 3 years of the life of John Corvinus that Susie just discussed, you had the envoys of John Corvinus and Stephen of Moldavia going together to Venice. So from this point of view, it's a rarity. Otherwise, you cannot find this. This relation then further developed at a subsequent Reichstag in Trier. And there you have the list. So you have those sitting on the right and those sitting on the left. And it's very interesting that you have the Wallachian, the ambassador of the Wallachians, following the ambassadors of the Pope, of the French king, of the English king, and of the King of Navarra. So he's basically seated amongst the European attendants, not among the attendants of inner proper empire. Then again, this is not always the case, because on the next day, you have the Wallachian seated with representatives of powers within the empire. And then changed again. This list basically are the main source for business at this Reichstag from a Wallachian Eastern perspective. This is one of the most extensive that I could find. It's from Christoph Scheur's Geschichtsbuch der Christenheit. And there you have the list with all the identifications. And here, however, you have, again, the Wallachian, but listed still on the left, but following representatives of powers within the Roman German Empire. So it could and could not be telling where they were actually seated, because it seemingly fluctuated at the same meeting, at the same encounter. Because, as I said, otherwise, when it comes to proper business, we don't have additional information, and this is most likely chiefly due to the lack of Regesta Imperii published documents, because when it comes to Regesta Imperii and for the period after 1504, we are down to a series of PhD theses defended under the auspices of Hermann Wittflecker, and then you had like Kaiser Maximilian, Das Reich, Europa, im Jahre, and then 1501, 1502, up to 1513, but very narrow 1 year. And if there was an entry in that, then you can somehow fill in the gaps. But there's this lack of additional information to that what you have in the Mittlere Reihe of the Reichstagsakten. And this leads to various peculiar situations. So, as I told you, I will focus on the year 1513, 1512. From a Hungarian perspective, 1513 is the year before 1514, before the uprising rebellion of Dózsa György, and it's the year marked by the failure of Bockutz, of Cardinal Bockutz, to secure the papal throne in March 1513, when he allegedly was counting on the support of Maximilian and Venice. But this is, as far as I could find, a story that still needs double checking. Anyhow, In 1513, since 1512, the attention in the case of Hungary was focused on the conflicts and the negotiations with the Ottoman Empire in the south. Ottoman Empire, that bear in mind that until April 1513 was in civil war and was still capable of posing major problems to its Christian European neighbors, even though the majority of the fighting was done in Asia. So in this case, it's an embassy sent by Ladislaus Jagiellon to the city of Görlitz, roughly 3 months after the victory of Sultan Selim at Yenişehir. And on July 14th, 1513, his representatives said, I will briefly sum it up, that his son, the future Solomon I, was sent to the Tatar Khan to Gazigirai to ask for help against the Hungarians. And then he moved to the Wallachians and also bid for their support. So basically now, the son of the Sultan, together with the power of the Tatar Khan and of that of Wallachia, entered Transylvania, took over all of its fortresses, and they want to divide the land among themselves and populate it with Turks. Of course, nothing of the sort happened. But this kind of fake news, medieval fake news, led to the city of Görlitz approving a sum of money to lend to the king for the defense of the realm. So in this respect, considering that at that time the voivode of Transylvania, John Zappa, moved from Debrecen to Szeged, then to Csonad, and then to Deva, and then back to Kolozsvár without apparently having any problems except reporting to the citizens of Sibiu, Hermannstadt, that potentially the Turks will attack Zajce, we have to move our attention a bit north and to the events of said year. So this Habsburg communication from August 1513, roughly 6 weeks after said message delivered to the city of Görlitz, and according to it, so Cyprian of Zentine to Lawrence Zaure, the vice-dom of the imperial court in Vienna, they were sending with Friedrich Harber a bride to the voivode of Moldavia. Now, here we have to bear in mind that, again, because of not intersecting documents with those preserved in the Regesta Imperi, when it came to Wallachia in the Deutsche Reichstage regarding the years 1510, 1513, the voivode of Wallachia and the Wallachians were identified not with the voivode of Moldavia, but with the voivode of Wallachia. Naturally, therefore, it did not make any sense. Now, what's interesting in the case of this bride is that this bride was a token of Maximilian's power to the nations of the world. So very interesting wording. What's more interesting, however, previous communications between the two of them, is that this was part of the discussions between Maximilian, his counselors, and the Wallachian embassy. They had met in Augsburg, and then the emperor had made them come to Worms, to the Reichstag. Altogether, a very interesting story. Now, to make a long story short, nothing became of said wedding. Invitations were sent out to Poland, and then when the wedding, twice postponed, finally was to be held, then who attacked Moldavia? The said Tartars. And we know there was a lot of destructions because you still have tombstones from that age preserved in Suceava, where you have various merchants who said that they died because they were the victims of Tartar attack in the year 1513. And the story flipped to that extent that by the beginning of 1514, it was doubtful if Bogdan III of Moldavia will survive. And this was the concern, primary concern apparently of Buda, when moving dignitaries like John Bornemisza, the castle of Buda, to Făgăraș, to the border with Wallachia, just to inquire what was happening there. Still, this Bogdan III survived, and he married. We know the name of his wife from 1515. Her name was Roxandra. Now the problem is that she was possibly not the bride sent to him by Maximilian. Why? Her mother was Vojka. She was the widow of Michna, voivod of Wallachia. And according to John Zapoya, 2 years earlier, meaning 4 years earlier, in November 1511, she was a finis nostra, so they were related. Now, as it is well known, there was no love lost between the House of Habsburg and the Zapoya family. Things could not have been more complicated at present because, as it turns out, according to Nod Levente's and Szilagyi Emekő's latest research, this Michna was not the legitimate son of Dracula, Vlad the Impaler, but was the legitimate son of Vlad III and of a unnamed sister of John Hunyadi, which complicates matters to the utmost. This is why I refrain myself from any further comments, just noting down this sort of private connections that then influence the big picture to an extent that we at first cannot imagine. What is certain is that after 1513, 1514, especially the Congress of Vienna in 1515, relations between Maximilian and the said Wallachians declined because later, at the end of 1516, according to the letter sent by famous Dantiscus to even more famous Sigismund von Herberstein, this Wallachian envoys needed Dantiscus in order to secure an audience with Emperor Maximilian. I chose this example for one reason, because it is this humanist network, Dantiscus, Cuspinian before him, even late Fuchsmagen, who were instrumental in securing these East-West connections ever since the late 1490s and the first documented relations between Habsburgs and rulers of Wallachia. And this now brings me to the issue of prudence. I could not identify culpa mea, any sources related to Wallachian presences to the Reichstage in Köln and in Constance in 1505 and 1507. 1507 was something that I was hoping to, because at that time you have Wallachian envoys from Wallachia, not from Moldavia, traveling all the way to Venice and to Rome to complain about Bogdan III of Moldavia, because Bogdan III was the protege of Venice. However, I could find nothing of the sort, at least until now. In 1505, the story is even more interesting because we're talking about the period after the Reichstag in Köln, which ended in the summer, and after chiefly the Diet of Rákos with the otherwise well-known incidents there. And this is part from the correspondence between Jan László, future Archbishop of Gniezno, and even more famous potentially Lukács Vacsanorode, the Bishop of Varmia-Ermland. And basically it says that the big problem in Hungary, I will not go into details because that would imply speculation, big problem in Hungary is that Maximilian could benefit from the support of the Wallachians. Now, the question is, which Wallachians? And to that issue, you cannot give a positive answer, not knowing what happened during the rest of the year. So, to sum up, the issue of Wallachians, you have Croatians as well, also under John Corvinus and Bernardin Frankopan, as Susie presented before me. Attending the Reichstage is, on one hand, a question of loyalty. Because, as we all know, through the Peace Treaty of Bratislava, since November 1491, you had three, in fact, at the beginning, kings of Hungary. One was Maximilian, and Frederick, his father, died in 1493, and the other one was Ladislaus Jagiellon. Because the voivodes of Wallachia and Moldavia were the vassals of the king of Hungary, did this then mean that they were also the vassals of the Habsburg king of Hungary, or was this a question of, let's say, European politics? Because if we look at this list of attendances at the Reichstage, you find Wallachian representatives chiefly among European powers, powers. And very interestingly, you don't find in this list, at least when Wallachians show, you don't find Hungarian or Polish representatives at these assemblies, not in the list with Wallachians. So as if they showed up, except for 1510, only when representatives from the Jagiellonian kingdoms were not present. The second part, on the other hand, why this topic is relevant, is because it shows that the lands to the east were pushing towards the west in the years prior to Mohács, or at least to the Congress of Vienna. And it's interesting, therefore, to note that after Mohács, in Wallachia above all, less in Moldavia, boyars and voivodes no longer feel loyal towards the Hungarian crown, because it's ended then. So they do not accept John Zápolya as the legitimate successor. So it's a change in the perception of loyalty, because their loyalty towards Hungary basically ended at Mohács and was, if at all, continued through the election of Ferdinand of Habsburg at the same time as John Zápolya was elected King of Hungary. I thank you very much for your attention, and I hope I have not bored you too much.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for all the speakers and contributors. Keep the time. And may I ask all three of them to proceed into the front line, as we have now a sort of tradition. You're going to face backing, big back, questions, commentaries, and remarks concerning the contributions. Now the floor is passed to the audience.
Thank you. Let's break the ice. All three nice presentations, but I will focus on something Suzana presented here. And this may sound as a redundant question, but trust me, it is not. And then I will comment, depending on your answer. So you presented this problem we are facing all the time, the problem of the nomenclature of the names. John, János, Ivanish, and so on and so on. So with respect to the name Ivanish, do we have, whether it's Ivanish Corvin or his grandfather Hunyadi, any mention of the name Ivanish in contemporary Slavic sources, contemporary to them, of course? And then, yeah.
So the problem is, as you actually know, I'm dealing with Latin sources, and this is actually a big step forward, because we have to, of course, include all of the other sources, because we know that Croatian lands in general are not only the lands of three languages, but they're also lands of three letters. And as you know, we have big problems with the preservation of Glagolitic and of Cyrillic letters of the period. Not only because of, so I don't know how to respond actually to your question, because I deal only and exclusively with Latin sources, but thank you, and I'm very interested in your input, because I know that you know more about at least Cyrillic sources.
Actually, yes, I expected that answer. The thing is, well, it is a Cyrillic source, but I'm dealing both with Cyrillic and Latin. There is an interesting set of coins minted near Belgrade, approximately at 1450s, which bears the name Despot Ivanish. So in Serbian historiography, it was, who is that Despot Ivanish? We don't have that name in the sources. There is no Despot Ivanish. It's Hunyadi. It's obviously the translation from Latin, Ioannes to Ivanish. And the things get complicated because in Serbian tradition, Hunyadi has the name Janko from Wallachian and Romanian Janko. So there are like very, very interesting, first the question of the names, how they're presented in different languages, but also the question of loyalties, because this series of coins, for example, opens the question who ruled the so-called Serbian despotate and about the loyalty of the local population. I think it's one of the rare cases where we have such a dignitary, such an important person, such as Hunyadi, to mint, or at least in his name, they were minted these coins in Cyrillic letter, and obviously the local population was not loyal to so-called Serbian despot, but to Hunyadi. And to add this more to this intriguing topic, Hunyadi is the first hero in Serbian epic poetry, the oldest Serbian song recorded, by the way, in southern Italy at the end of 15th century. Hunyadi is the positive guy and Serbian despot Đurić is the negative one. So it's also the thing to open the question of loyalty, not only of the upper strata of society, but also the lower ones. I wanted to present that topic at this conference, but I gave up. By the way, I thought the topic seemed too local for this audience, but maybe at one point. So thank you. Yeah.
So, speaking of that, as you all know, John Hunyadi had a younger brother named also John, who died at some point in Transylvania, 1440, 1441. Anyhow, it's uncertain whether they were father on their father's side, brothers on their father's side, on their mother's side, or whatsoever. But they bore the same Christian name, Johannes. So John, the famous John, he went by Janko, usually in that environment, and also in Italy, hence the White Knight, Bianco. That's a long story. But the younger brother, again, Slavic Serbian, let's say, tradition, he was listed as Ivašku in order to differentiate him from his elder, more famous brother. So when it comes to these names, it's a total complex matter that really requires a lot of attention. As you both said, well, you have one approach when it comes to Latin and one approach when it comes to, well, Slavic, Cyrillic, preserved documents. Sorry.
I have the question concerning emblematics and so on, whether there are non-written sources, but pictorial sources where you can read something about these ambitions and about these ideas and so on.
The final thing that you actually saw was from the Pauline monastery. We have very big problems with the Pauline monastery because of its subsequent, well, let's say, development. It was it's had several fires, and then there was a problem with the fact that it was a prison, and then it was also burned again. And now, since 2018, the Croatian Restoration Institute is trying to somehow resolve the problems, what was left. This is why the fresco that I showed was in black and white, because this was taken when it was still there. And until now, they managed to reconstruct only parts of the previous let's call it frescoes that were there. But otherwise, it is very interesting case because allegedly they also found graves. But this is a more complex issue because we shall see what the further research will bring, whether it's actual graves or not. But besides that, this Pauline monastery in general is interesting because it was founded by Herman Cili, the father-in-law of Sigismund of Luxembourg, in the vicinity of their estate or Grafschaft of Zagorje in Croatia. But except for that, we also had problems, of course, as you know, with the Ottomans, so a lot of things were not preserved from the period.